All right, so this week we're doing a deep dive. And I gotta say, this one's a little out there even for us.
Yeah, this is definitely a unique one.
It is. We're talking about Bryan Johnson. This guy's a tech millionaire, made his millions, and now, well, he says he's on a mission to not die.
Yes, you do, right. I mean, who hasn't dreamt of immortality? But this guy's really, really taking it seriously.
Yeah, seriously, might be an understatement. We've got articles piled up here. Time, Fortune, The Guardian. They're all over this guy.
And they don't hold back, do they? He's become kind of a poster boy for this whole biohacking movement, pushing the limits, some might say.
Pushing is putting it mildly. We're talking 111 pills a day, food that looks like it came from a lab, not a
Yeah.
kitchen, the whole 9 yards.
Right, and let's not forget the more intimate tracking. I mean, who knew you could monitor that much data about your own body?
It's wild, isn't it? Blood work, sure, but stool samples. Nighttime, uh, you know, makes you wonder if there's a line.
Well, there probably should be, right? But that's the thing about Johnson. He seems to be all about pushing those boundaries, seeing just how far he can go.
And let's not forget, he's got the money to do it. This isn't some DIY biohacking in your garage. The Time article, I think it was, mentioned he's dropping like $2 million a year on all this.
Yeah, 2 million. Puts things in perspective a bit, doesn't it? Like, this is the 1% of the 1% when it comes to health optimization.
No kidding. So for those of us who haven't inherited a tech fortune, what's the takeaway here?
Well, I think it's about looking at the science behind some of this stuff. Some of what Johnson's doing, exercise, diet, that's basic good health advice. Then you've got, well, the blood plasma swaps with his son. That's where things get a little, shall we say, experimental.
More than a little, right? I mean, that sounds like something straight out of a movie. You're telling me that's actual science.
Well, sort of. It's based on this idea called parabiosis, where they link the blood systems of two animals, different ages, and see what happens. Still very early days, mostly done on, well, rodents, not humans.
So Johnson's basically a guinea pig. His own guinea pig in this case.
In a way, yes. And that's where the ethical concerns come in. Plus, the experiment, they actually stopped it, didn't get the results they were after.
See, even with all the money and the best minds, it's not a guaranteed thing, this whole immortality game. What's the lesson there? Don't try this at home, kids.
Exactly. Consult a professional, as they say.
Always good advice, especially when dealing with something as, well, complex as your own biology. I mean, it's almost like he's trying to, I don't know, like sanitize life, take out all the rough edges.
That's a really insightful way to put it. And it gets at something deeper, I think. This whole thing with Johnson, it's not JST about the science, right? It's about our anxieties, our cultural hangups, about getting older, about death.
Oh, for sure. We're bombarded with messages about staying young, like it's the only thing that matters.
Exactly. Anti-aging creams, hair dye, you name it. It's this idea that aging is a problem to be solved, not a natural part of life.
And Johnson's coming in with this very Silicon Valley solution, right? Like
Mm.
hack the code, upgrade the hardware, boom, immortality.
Precisely. And let's not forget, it's a very expensive solution. 2 million a year buys you a lot of kale smoothies.
And probably a whole team of people to make those smoothies, let's be real.
Right. So then it begs the question, even if this stuff worked perfectly, who gets access? It's a whole other can of worms.
Huge ethical dilemma, for sure. But back to Johnson's method.
Yeah.
Even if we set aside the cost, it's like he's optimizing for one thing and one thing only, living longer.
And that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, okay, you can live to be 200, but what's the point if you're not actually living?
Yeah, I mean, one quote that really stuck with me, I think is from that Fortune article. He talks about wanting to align his 35 trillion cells to a single objective.
It's a very, how should I say this, a very mechanistic view of being human, right? Like we're just machines to be fine-tuned.
But what about the things that make life worth living, right? The connections, the experiences, the good, the bad, the messy stuff.
Exactly. Love, loss, joy, heartbreak. Those are all part of the human experience. You can't just engineer those out.
You know what I find interesting? They mention his son, Talmadge, in a couple of these articles. He's adopted some of his dad's habits, but
But he seems to have found a bit more of a balance, right? Like he's not taking it to the same extreme.
yeah, and good for him. I mean, can you imagine only eating at 11 a.m. every day? No thanks.
There's something to be said for enjoying a good meal with friends.
Right.
Or just, living spontaneously.
Right. I feel like with Johnson, it's all about delaying gratification, but for what? Some future version of himself that might not even exist.
That's the irony, isn't it? He's so busy trying to not die, he might be missing out on actually living.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Like, where's the line? When
Yeah.
does wanting to be healthy tip over into, I don't know, obsession.
It's a slippery slope, right? And it's not just a thought experiment anymore, is it? I mean, Johnson's got this whole don't die movement now.
Yeah, it's gone way beyond just him and his smoothies. People are buying into this, literally and figuratively.
And not just the Silicon Valley crowd either. The articles mention these don't die events. They're popping up everywhere. Sydney, Singapore, it's a whole thing.
It really is. Makes you wonder, what's the appeal? Why are people so drawn to this message?
Well, we talked about it earlier, right? That fear of aging, the idea that getting older is somehow failing. Johnson's selling a very tempting alternative.
Right, like, forget wrinkles and gray hair. We're talking immortality here. Sign me up.
Easier said than done, right? But you can see how it's alluring, especially with Johnson as this kind of, I don't know, guru figure. He's got the money, the tech, the results, at least on paper.
He's like the ultimate self-improvement project.
Yep.
Only it's not just about, learning a new language or whatever. It's about conquering death itself,
Which, let's be honest, is a pretty ambitious goal.
to say the least. But again, it comes back to that balance, doesn't it? Is it really living if you're so focused on not dying that you miss out on everything else?
Exactly. You can optimize your body, your diet, your entire routine. But what about optimizing your relationships, your experiences, your sense of purpose?
Those things are harder to quantify, right? You can't measure them on a spreadsheet or with a blood test.
And maybe that's the point. Maybe some things are meant to be felt, not measured. And maybe, just maybe, embracing the finitude of life, the fact that it doesn't last forever, is what makes it so precious.
Wow, okay, I wasn't expecting to get philosophical today, but I kind of like it.
It happens. But it's true, right? When you think about it, knowing that our time is limited can be a powerful motivator to make the most of it, to connect with the people we love, to pursue our passions, to really live while we still can.
Deep stuff. So where does this leave us? What have we learned from our deep dive into the world of Bryan Johnson and his quest for immortality?
Well, I think it's given us a lot to chew on. It's challenged us to examine our own beliefs about aging, about death, about what truly matters in this one precious life we've got.
For sure. And maybe, at the end of the day, there's no right or wrong answer. It's about finding what works for you right. Within reason, of course.
Hmm.
I'm not sure I'm ready to give up carbs entirely.
No, I don't think I am either. But in all seriousness, I think the key takeaway is this: live curiously, explore your options, take care of yourself, but don't get so caught up in the pursuit of longevity that you forget to actually live.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we're wrapping up our deep dive. Thanks for joining us for this wild ride. Until next time, stay curious out there.
And stay alive, preferably without 111 pills a day.
Now you're speaking my language. See you next time, everybody.